want to thank you very much for inviting me. My primary interest as a CPA is in business valuation, litigation support, and expert witness, and I work in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. corridor, as does my co-host, David Levy, L. Levy. I think what is important to understand and why I wanted to make it a point to come up, because there is alienation and abuse of all forms. And in this valuation, it comes to light mainly in the financial areas. I've found in my experience that husbands who are looking to divorce are planning anywhere from 2 years to 10 years before they announce. And they decimate their business in such a way so that it will be valued so much less as to be able to not support a lifestyle that the family has been used to, be able to provide enough for child support or even for alimony. And as a forensic accountant as well, we have to go beyond the norm and actually dig into the numbers and find out what is going on so with regard to support. And one trick that I have been using continually, I developed a lifestyle form where I sit down with the husband and ask him the family expenses that he's paying either on a monthly or annual basis, what he's paying personally because now he's out of the house and he has a separate apartment, and other expenses. And when you come up with those amounts of net cash flows out of his pocket and then increase it for the taxes he must pay, at least you're coming up with a floor of income that he must be earning. And if that's, and the business is not supporting that, then we have to be able to dig further. One of the most egregious cases I ever worked on was a doctor who only claimed to be earning $240,000 a year. And we found out he paid a commission to his son of $300,000. He paid for his daughter's schooling. His mistress was on the board of directors. When we looked into the American Express, we found Tiffany purchases, Pravda bags, silk scarves, dresses, and other things for his mistress. We were able to prove to the court that he was earning approximately about $1.3 million. So the family suffers monetarily in his angst and earnest to purport to show to the court and to the family that he's not doing well. And of course, as we have heard before, fathers use in many cases the money as a tool against his ex-spouse, against the children, to affect what he wants as so far as control. And again, that is abuse and a form of alienation. Because we know kids are affected in so many ways, and all they want to do is be loved. And I recently spoke at a conference at University of Maryland to attorneys and judges of the appellate court and the special appeals. And thankfully, what they did was they scheduled this conference on a holiday, so the courts were closed. And I would say to you all that it's extremely important that the triers of fact be invited to a conference such as this. That's just another way of being able to educate them and get the word out. We are all passionate about what we do, and we understand what we are doing. But unless we can get their ear and get their understanding and educate them, this is going to be a longer and harder road to accomplish. I am now proud to announce that our next speaker is David L. Levy, is an attorney and co-founder of the Children's Rights Council, a 24-year-old child advocacy organization working to protect children whose parents are separated, divorced, or never married. David is currently the president of CRC's Board of Trustees. CRC is a global organization based in Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C., and he can be found at www.crckids.org. CRC distributes educational information to judges, policymakers, and parents on the needs of children, particularly the relationship of family structure to childhood outcomes. That is, there is a relationship between two parent families in divorce, as well as in marriage, and the increase in the number of children who finish high school, avoid involvement in drugs and crime, and avoid teenage pregnancy. CRC is a major proponent of joint custody to help strengthen children's relationships to both parents and extended families. CRC and its chapters operate 25 access and visitation centers in 11 states and Washington, D.C. Please put your hands together for David L. Levy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudick. Good morning, everybody. Do you get Beetle Bailey comic strip up here? Some people I hear a laugh. Chris, yes. Well, remember Camp Swampy, General Half-Track of Camp Swampy? He's going to a divorced parent support group. His secretary says, "General, you're not divorced." The general says, "I'm going to the meeting anyway. Their stories help prevent me from wanting to get a divorce." I had a custody battle about 30 years ago. My first wife wanted to divorce me, but there was a little bit of parental alienation attempted, but not much. Her heart was not in it, thank God. And our 2-year-old son, therefore, was able to grow up and to be the happy, healthy adult he was meant to be, and all kids are meant to be. He's now 32 and a licensed acupuncturist in Portland, Oregon, married to a doctor of naturopathy. And then I got remarried to my second continuous permanent wife. True, and we have a 23-year-old daughter who is working at a public high school in Brooklyn, New York. 2 wives, 2 kids, that's wonderful, but that's enough. I'm not divorcing her. I don't care what you lawyers say. I'm a lawyer too, never mind. I'm going to give you a little background on Children's Rights Council as a segue into the state of parenting in the U.S. in general and what we can do to help popularize the concept of parental alienation as a form of child abuse. Not popularize child abuse, but popularize the concept so we can do more to help prevent it and treat it. On Capitol Hill about 24 years ago in Congress, there were hearings on how to tighten the financial child support apparatus. And Jim Cook was the founder of the Joint Custody Association who died recently at age 85, and he got California to be the first strong joint custody law in the country, state. And he and I testified before some congressional groups, and Jim especially, because I was learning from him then, said, let's start at the parenting end of the telescope. If we focus on parenting, joint custody, mediation, parenting education, counseling, mediation, and that will involve both parents in the lives of their kids, and the financial child support problem will resolve itself because involved parents are paying parents. Congress wasn't going for that. They just wanted to focus on the financial end of the telescope. Just collect that money through liens or deception of tax returns, 10 most wanted lists, jailings, anything punitive to get the collections. And it's worked. U.S. collects $24 billion a year for the federal government in child support, financial child support every year. What does it collect in emotional child support? That's something different. But that was the way Congress wanted to go and the way it has gone. And the U.S. government only spends $10 million a year for the parenting part, the mediation, the counseling, the parent education, the access centers in grants to the states. The CRC, we were the catalyst behind that that federal money to the states. So, and the federal government in the U.S. spends $4 billion a year to collect financial child support, and so $10 million for the parenting side. What's that ratio? What's that disparity? 4 billion to 10 million. And who's the accountant? Mr. Rudick? It's 400 to 1, right? You said it, 400 to 1. Do Americans really, does the lower 48, as you call it, the lower 48 really think that collecting money is 400 times more important than collecting or encouraging or stimulating the parental role? I doubt it. I just completed a book on this, looking for a publisher. Anyway, no, of course they don't, but no one's ever put it in exactly those stark terms. But the outcomes for children are remarkable. Kids generally do better in marriage, we know that. But research is overwhelming that even kids of divorce, where they have two active parents, have far better outcomes than children raised by single parent. 85% of men in prison were raised without a father. Children of single parents are 3 times more likely to drop out of high school than children who have active two parents, even in divorce. This is all in a meta-analysis by Robert Bousman, published in the American Psychological Association Journal several years ago, this meta-analysis of all this research. And children of two parents, even in divorce, are much less likely to be involved in teen pregnancy as guy or gal, or get involved in gangs, or drugs or crime, than much less likely than children raised by single parents. Gangs are a replacement for the family. If you have a family, you don't need a gang. And that's what the substantiation of the two-parent family in divorce would indicate. CRC has held 16 national conferences over the years to bring together policymakers, educators, researchers, writers, to try to propagate the ideas that, of children's needs. Richard Gardner spoke at 4 or 5 of those conferences. Other speakers have included Richard Sauber, Jane Major, Michael Bone, Richard Warshak, U.S. senators, House members, and others, to try to get the ideas out there that would help children. Well, CRC also, as was mentioned, operates with its chapters 25 access centers in 11 states and Washington, D.C. We know that this is a very difficult situation for many parents, but we also find, and the courts find, that at least the centers where we run them, that if it were not for these centers, some children would not be seeing their parents at all. The most wonderful thing is to see a child run up into the arms of a dad or mom the child hasn't seen in weeks or months, and seeing that parent for the first time. The parent with the child will say, bring the child Friday evening between 7 and 8 p.m. for a handoff under trained staff. And these are mostly in churches and synagogues, YMCAs. We have family-friendly places. And we have trained staff. We train them ourselves. They're not social workers. They could be grandparents, mothers, fathers who are not involved in any individual case. But we train them to make certain parents follow the rules, but also to be family and child-friendly. So a parent brings the child on a Friday evening, 7 to 8 p.m., for handoff appropriately to the other parent. And then 2 nights later, Sunday evening, the weekend parent returns the child to that same center for return to the weekday parent. On Saturday mornings, there usually would be supervised access, like 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., where a parent cannot leave the premises with the child. But at least child and parent are spending precious time together until that larger issue can be resolved in the courts. We don't know why the court's making the referral. The court order doesn't say it. But we know it's for abuse, neglect, fear of parental flight, could be parental alienation. Whatever it is, the parents have to follow certain rules. They can't take the child to the bathroom themselves because it might be a sexual abuse a referral. They cannot talk against the other parent. They cannot talk about the court case. They just have to focus on spending precious time with their child. And about 35% of the parents referred to use the center as supervised are moms who don't have custody of their kids. We were surprised at that high number, but that's been substantiated by our centers in Ohio, New Mexico, and California. And a certain number of those parents move up from supervised to transfer after several months. Some of them then get free of any restrictions, which is the ultimate goal. What's the best way to deal with parental alienation? We've heard of lots of ideas at this important conference, and I'm welcome to add some thoughts to it. Certainly, we don't allow other kinds of abuse. Even spanking is no longer tolerated much among kids. Dr. Murray Strauss has found that spanking actually, quote, produces a small increase in subsequent inappropriate behavior, end quote. We don't allow family violence. We don't allow kidnapping of children. We need to elevate parental alienation to the recognized form of child abuse, and I think we're all committed to that. The parents I know who are successful in dealing with parental alienation had certain characteristics in common. Dr. Baker referred to some of them last night. I have a slightly different set, but these are not all-inclusive. You don't have to do them all. Someone may have ideas on some other aspects. But because part of the education is educating parents on how to deal with this, and that's something many of us, or if not all of us, are engaged in. Parents I know of who helped successfully deal with parental alienation had certain characteristics. They completed a parenting course such as Breakthrough Parenting by Jane Major and stuck with it until they rated excellent the knowledge, skills, and methods taught. Their parenting became superior. They were even-tempered, logical, and kept their emotions under control. They never retaliated. A person who reacts in anger is proving the alienator's point that he or she is unstable. Am I right so far? Does that agree with what you found? Yep. Also, those parents thought of giving up but never did, right? No matter how awful the harassment got, they were worried about leaving their daughter or son in that hostile environment. They were driven to continue to trying to get the court to understand the seriousness of the issues and to change primary custody to them. And we favor joint custody, but joint custody is not for everyone. These parents were willing and able to go to the financial expense of seeing it through. They joined a parent support group, which offers resources, referrals, and information. From that group, they obtained help from a skilled family lawyer if they needed a lawyer. I get so many calls. We get so many calls in south of the border. That's what you call the states, right? South of the border. We get so many calls from parents. They're our neighbors. Yes. They're your neighbors. Yeah. Down south, huh? We get so many calls. I'm not making light of the calls we get, but because they're very serious. But we got so many calls from parents, 3 lawyers and $50,000 down the road. Help me. They paid tens of thousands of dollars for a lawyer, but won't spend $50 to join a parent support group. It always amazes me. When I was going through my battle 30 years ago, the first thing I did was go to a parent support group in Northern Virginia. I was a copyright lawyer. What do I know about custody? Nothing. I went to the meeting every 2 weeks to get more information, resources, strategy. 6 months later, I was running the meetings. But it was invaluable to me to get that. I always recommend it to people. Or go to our website, get something. I know I talked to one person here who had been in the military for 25 years, and he was able to develop a counterattack strategy. But very few of us have that kind of military background where we can do a planning that might get us somewhere without help from other people who've been through it, who know the score, and can advise us. The parents who have also been able to help themselves have become good at understanding how the courts work and the law as it is applied to their case. In many cases, because of excessive expenses, parents even ended up pro se, pro pair, representing themselves where they were representing themselves without a lawyer. These parents also had a case where a forensic evaluator, such as Richard Sauber or Michael Bone, made a strong statement about the alienation and recommended changing legal and primary custody to the alienated parent. Some parents had to go back to the evaluator to demonstrate that his or her earlier recommendations were not working. These parents also persevered in demonstrating that they were rational, reasonable, and had the best interests of the child at heart. They provided the court with an appropriate parenting plan that showed how the child would be well taken care of in their care. They understood the nature of the problem and focused on what to do about it, even though they and their children were being victimized. Alienated parents who get caught up in, quote, how terrible it all is, end quote, and spend time judging the situation went under emotionally, in my experience. The parents who had success or hope for success did not live a victim's life and were proactive in seeking constructive action. They avoided adding to the problem. One father expressed it like this: I don't know how to make it better with the mother, but I do know how to make it worse. He was one of the most successful parents I met in fighting the PAS problem because he stayed in the role of the peacemaker. These good parents kept a diary or journal of key events describing what happened and when. That's been recommended earlier at this conference. They documented the alienation with evidence that was admissible in court. They always called or showed up to pick up their children. I'm also echoing other presenters. They always called up or showed up to pick their children. They never missed a scheduled access time, even if they knew the children would not be there or unlikely to be. This was often very painful, but then they could document that they tried when the alienator alleged that the parent had no interest in the child. They focused on enjoying their children's company and never talked to their children about their case. They always took the high road and never talked badly about the other parent to their children. They absolutely never showed a child any court orders or other sensitive documents. They didn't let the children overhear inappropriate conversations on the telephone. They sent their children care packages, including photos of themselves and their child doing an activity that both of them enjoyed. Photos of them as a young child, and then birthday cards and holiday greeting cards, sometimes with a check. Have any of you tried these things? Has it helped?
Yes, it does. It actually does.
It has helped?
It implants a seed in their mind, and when they do see me at an activity, even though they do not want to acknowledge me, there's always that one look of, while they're playing basketball, hey, did you see me make that shot? They're looking to see if I saw.
They're looking to see if you made that shot.
Right.
Do you volunteer at the school?
I go up to the school and all the events that my children are at, no matter what.
Even if you can't volunteer in their classroom, they'll know you're there.
Absolutely. I make myself present.
Terrific. And you were saying something too? That lady right behind you? Yes. Same thing? You're alienated mothers, right? God bless you, and may things change.
Thank you.
Even if you're agnostic, may God bless you. Who knows? Who knows? The shadow knows. I'm sorry, did you say, sir, did you have a?
It's very hard. I actually had a taxi driver deliver all my stuff to my children and get a signed signature from them or my wife, like for 21st birthday, the flowers or birthday cards, anything. I had to go to that extent because it was never given to them.
Did you all hear that? He had to have a taxi driver deliver everything. Why a taxi driver?
Well, it was cheap.
It was cheap?
Yes, sir.
Taxis are that cheap?
Well, $40 is a lot cheaper than a lawyer.
Cheaper than a lawyer, a taxi. Now that's the first time I heard that one. They got the same message. Wow.
You can use that. I'll let you use that.
Well, I used to be a copyright lawyer. I retired from the government 11 years ago to do this full time. And I was running CRC from inside the U.S. Library of Congress Copyright Office. Do you ever hear of Wade Horn?
Yes.
Down in the U.S.? He said I was the only one running a national nonprofit from inside a federal government agency. But I was able to retire 11 years ago. My wife said I'd be able to write grants, know how to do that once I retired. Oxymoron? Who's a moron? Running a nonprofit inside an agency? Well, John Bauserman Sr., one of our co-founders, says that the governments helped get us into this mess. The governments should give us time to help get us out. And final couple things about parents. It was obvious these successful parents or parents working for success love their children. They offered to use an access center in their jurisdiction for transitional parenting. Even though they didn't want to, they never gave up any effort or means that was offered to them to see their children. I mentioned joining chapters. We have 7 chapters in 7 countries other than the U.S. Brian Jenkins is head of our CRC of Canada chapter. Brian, stand up a moment. And Jason Bouchard is our activist in Ottawa. Jason, stand up. We also have chapters in UK, Japan, Australia, Israel, Switzerland, and France. Now, that's about parents, but how are we going to educate the public and the policymakers, that is the elected officials and others, and judges and everyone about this problem? Clearly a conference like this helps. Earlier conferences have helped. We must help the policymakers and judges understand that if you talk against the other parent, there's a legal consequence. Now, we can't stop free speech. The certain amount of alienation or knocking the other parent goes on. Well, I'm talking about the severe cases, the cases that warrant public and judicial attention. There needs to be a fine, makeup of visitation, a reversal of custody, or even, my wife doesn't like this, my saying this, but throw someone in jail for a couple of hours. Not a week, a couple of hours maybe. That can send a powerful signal. Anybody agree?
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell my wife you agreed with me. My second one. I'm still friendly with the first one. We are still friendly. It's nice. And my son is loyal to his mom. I never would disabuse him of that. My son from that first marriage. If a parent has committed some type of child abuse other than parental alienation, such as physical or sexual abuse, then the courts would take the appropriate action against a perpetrator. Distinguishing among various types of abuse is the job of the frontline worker, the social worker, courts, legislature, and others who deal with children. We need to educate them more. This means on the larger public front, we must also educate lawyers. And some professionals dismiss PAS, we know, and think it does not exist. But then, how can these individuals explain the unreasonable rejection of a parent by a child? Notice I say unreasonable and unjustified. We need to double or triple the number of people who understand the problem and can explain it in letters to the editor, or in conversations with others, and in public debate. I saw a lawyer in Prince George's County, Maryland, where CRC is headquarters, talk to some judges several years ago. She understood the problem so well, and she was educating about 10 or 15 judges, and I happened to be present there. I later enlisted her in an individual case and found that she fell down the job. She understood it conceptually, but could not put it into practice. And I never utilized her again, but I know there are others who combine both the conceptual and the practical. We need more social activists and social activist groups that will connect to the media and state legislators and members of Congress and your Canadian Parliament members. We need citizen committees to put pressure on social service agencies to have more training sessions about parental alienation. There's generally more power in numbers, but history is full of examples of determined, committed individuals who effected major change. I mentioned Jim Cook. Jim Cook had lost a custody battle in around 1974, and he asked for joint custody, and the judge, kind of laughed or just dismissed it out of hand. So Jim, in California, 1979, mobilized and convinced the California legislature, which often leads in public thinking among legislatures in the U.S., to pass the first strong joint custody law in the U.S. It became effective in 1980. And then Jim Cook went state to state with his deep knowledge of the research, his laid-back California style, his easygoing nature, and helped convince other legislatures, boards, and commissions about the value of joint custody. This is one person who made a difference. When he died recently, I was on National Public Radio, All Things Considered, as was Jane Major, talking about Jim Cook, how one person could make a difference. I call him the father of joint custody. But lest you think that one person can't do it, of course there's safety in numbers, and numbers are often the best way to do it, because you have colleagues and sharing information and resources and activities, but one person can fight City Hall. It's often worked, right? Robert Fay, have you ever heard of him? He was a medical doctor in the US. Years ago, found out he could not get the school records of his child. He helped convince Congress to make an exception to FERPA, Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, which guaranteed privacy of school records. That's why in the US, you can't get your child's college report card, right? Even though if you're paying tuition. But there's an exception there if the child goes to an elementary or junior or public high school, which receives any US federal funds, which is 99% of all schools, even private schools, receive some funding from the US government. So we got an exception put in there, and then found his school system still wasn't giving him the report card for his son. So he filed a suit, and won in federal court. So he finally got the report card. And that's one person, Robert Fay, Dr. Robert Fay, who also made a difference. We must note that not only legal consequences, but moral and ethical consequences. It's got to be on all fronts, legal, ethical, and moral consequences to parental alienation, not just legal, but it's got to be seen as wrong action. Now, Amy Baker last night laid out the differences between parental alienation and legitimate complaints about a parent's being abusive, right? She laid out Richard Gardner's 8 factors, such as barred scenarios, the absolute rejection of a parent, the extending the alienation to other family members, the seeing things in black and white, total identification with the alienating parent. The 8 factors, right? Then she also, that developed by Richard Gardner. Then she also showed several factors where there can be real abuse, such as the parent doesn't even want to talk about it, as distinguished from the child who wants to continually talk about in the alienation area, where the child doesn't really want to talk about abuse, has to be coaxed, the information has to be coaxed and pursued and drawn out from that child who really has been abused by a parent. So there are sharp differences here, and we need perhaps more flyers stating the differences as part of the education process for the general public and lawyers. So I commend you on what you're doing. All of you here are fighters, or you wouldn't be here. In one way or another, you're fighting, and we must continue it and continue the education process, and I thank you very much.